Happy Friday morning, everybody. Thanks for checking in our latest Trade to Black podcast. I'm your host, Shad Dales. Big show here today. Michael Bronstein is going to come on in just a moment, talk about the latest news. As we said the other day about Pennsylvania and the state-run model is dead on arrival. We'll find out what's next, as well as news in Texas. We got a few things coming up here today, too. We'll talk about Curaleaf. CGC, they announced when their latest earnings is going to be later this month. And the big one, Terry Cole, and the questions that he was asked by Senator Cory Booker this week. What's our main takeaway? So with that, let's welcome in AV here on a Friday morning. Good to see you.
How's it going?
I am good. I noticed right when I started the show, I forgot to have the old TDR logo in the background, but got that fixed in real time.
That is that's show business.
Just Chad, thanks. Good morning, TDR fam. Good morning to you as well. Skip Swellman, good to see you. Thank goodness it's Friday. My Canna Brothers, good to see you. David Benz, how's your week been, Mr. Varrell?
Good. It's good. It's been busy. We got a little pump yesterday on no news, which looks like some of it's staying.
Yeah, I saw that.
Village Farms news was nice to see. It's been a nice little decent week, other than the
what was that?
Shock headlines.
That little spike yesterday.
No idea.
MSO.
To be honest.
Yeah,
MSOX was up like 15%, I think, intraday.
AVCN out of Canada, they had their latest earnings as well. We'll get into that in just a moment, but they were up, I think, over 15%. It looks like it right now at the time of this podcast. They're up another 7%. So good for them and Arras and his team. But that's a story that we've been following closely over the last 6 months, and rightfully so. But we keep talking about this Canadian narrative. It's just a lot of momentum building among some key companies in Canada. And like Margaret said the other day, and I thought she had some great feedback just to how far advanced Canada is when you federally legalize cannabis. But there's obviously domestic opportunity, and we've talked about exporting opportunity as Europe begins to come to fruition. And it's nice to see, as it starts to expand a little bit.
Yeah, the global cannabis opportunity is taking shape. The EU, Australia, Canada, they're maturing at much quicker rates than the U.S. Due to just not federal necessarily, but just federal reform in action. Inaction as it relates to federal reform has stunted the growth of the industry. It's created a lot of uncertainty. It's posed more questions than answers. And the global community has moved forward. I mean, Australia is one of the fastest growing medical markets in the world. Germany is one of the fastest growing medical markets in the world. The EU are embracing medical cannabis first, and the federal governments are embracing cannabis on the front end versus building the industry and then reverse engineering reform. They're getting it. They're building the plane the right way, not building the plane while flying it, which is what we're doing now. Which is why there's a lot of uncertainty and a lot of questions that need answering as it relates to reform.
Well, I think the good thing is that people are now starting to understand the opportunity. We always talked about what could be, and now it's actually coming to fruition. And that's what's actually creating a lot of attention towards a lot of these Canadian LPs. So once you understand something, you start to see money fluctuated into some of these companies. So that's the encouraging thing. But man, we'd have fireworks if we got some sort of rescheduling. And speaking of rescheduling, let's begin with that. And Mr. Terry Cole, President Trump's nominee, as we know, to lead the DEA, which I think is going to be confirmed. I don't know when that is. Do you know when that is scheduled, timeline-wise?
It's got to be within the next 2 weeks, I'm pretty sure. I don't know if there's a firm date as of right now.
Well, earlier this week, as we know, he was at a Senate confirmation hearing, and he was grilled, and I mean grilled, by a number of senators, including New Jersey Senator Cory Booker, about whether he would support the rescheduling of cannabis from a Schedule I to a Schedule III. He was pretty direct with some of those questions. This is a move that's been backed, as we know, by the HHS and formally proposed by the DOJ during the Biden administration. So there were some direct questions, and the way I look at this is political tightrope. What's he going to say in this situation? But again, I said, and there's a great video that I did yesterday. It's got almost 20,000 views, but I think he's playing political tightrope. There's only so much he can say right now. And I'm not reading too much into this, but the key here is he's not shutting anything down right now. But what was your main takeaway from some of the questions that was asked by Booker and Padilla as well out of California? I'm correct. He's from California.
Yeah. Padilla is from California.
Sorry, man.
This was also written. These questions were a written response to Senator Booker and Padilla that submitted the questions to Administrator Cole as a follow-up to the hearing. That was a couple of weeks back. They were opaque answers. They were very general answers. They were not giving a lot of color. I haven't seen any of the candidates that are going through these hearings or going through these processes be very flamboyant or be very direct in their responses. They kind of got to cater to both sides of who is a pro and a con for their confirmation. He said what he needed to say in the actual hearing. I commend Senator Booker and Padilla for submitting these questions. They're questions that we do need answers to, and I think we'll get the answers to them in due time.
Yeah, I agree. Big takeaway I got, and I don't know how you're reading this, but the HHS, has already done the scientific legwork, as we know, and historically, the DEA in its 50 plus years of existence has never gone against an HHS rescheduling recommendation. How much do you think that plays into this narrative, if
never
any?
Say never.
Yeah, I know.
I
think that's
never say never with anything that we've gone through. But like we went through with Shane Pennington, I think 2 weeks ago when the hearing was going on in real time. You've got the HHS document, you've got the OLC memo. Those are going to be very hard to overturn. The science is there, and the judge, jury, and executioner here to this day still stays Donald J. Trump. Donald J. Trump wants cannabis rescheduled under his administration. He will direct them to do so, and they'll get it done. If he doesn't, then we're probably going to see some grandstanding and stalling of the processes or denial of facts, but everything points to him wanting to get it done, him believing in medical marijuana, and progressing cannabinoid research in the United States. Granted, he hasn't said anything pertaining to it since he was on the campaign trail. And I know that we only have that one data point that we keep coming back to, and Tom over at Marijuana Moment and several other advocates and talking heads in the industry keep saying, well, he hasn't said anything since. Can't really argue that he hasn't. He says plate full. But if he wants to get it done, he'll get it done.
Well, there's another important angle to this as well, in addition to tax relief, but there's a huge enforcement component here, and that's what Senator Padilla was kind of alluding to. And he asked whether Cole would ensure state legal cannabis businesses are protected. And again, no clear answer, but it's interesting to see how that plays out as well. And if the DEA enforcement could remain aggressive in some of these legal markets, even if the event and it is rescheduled. But I really don't know how much, quote unquote, they're being aggressive, because from what I hear in a number of states, including yours, how much is cannabis a priority right now? And it seems like obviously it's not.
It's not. I mean, it's not. I mean, some people can pretend that it is. We'll continue to say that cannabis is not a priority. However, it's something that a lot of people foresee getting done in the near future and before the midterms. But no, it's not. Cannabis is not a priority. I mean, you've got trade wars that are going on around the world. You've got the markets that are very volatile. Mm-hmm. You've got the budget bill and tax guidance moving forward that's getting done. You've got inflation that's probably going to hit from the tariffs. There's a lot of shit going on. And then you've got all the geopolitical stuff that's going on. Cannabis is not in his thought processes on a daily basis.
So what's your main takeaway?
On his priority list.
What is your main takeaway? Just finishing off on this topic here today. That just
main takeaway is get the man in office and let him do what he said he was going to do.
Yeah.
He's going to go through the science. He's going to go through the evidence that he sees in front of him, and he's going to make a decision. Whether he's already been instructed to make a decision by Donald Trump, that's yet to be determined, but he's going to do what he's going to do.
Yeah. Tight-lipped, and we continue to hear that out of Washington. Donald Trump wants to control this narrative, and everybody's just kind of like laying low. But if something does happen, we're not going to be given any kind of rumor, so to speak, in advance. Like, this is just going to come out of left field, similar to when Canopy basically raised $5 billion with Constellation. That just came out of nowhere. But I think you're going to expect the same thing with this. And if it does happen, we're not going to know. And it's just going to happen. So anyway, let's move now to international news. Curaleaf company just launched its branded medical cannabis products in the land down under in Australia. And don't sleep on Australia, because it's one of the fastest growing medical markets in the world, projected to top $1 billion by 2026. They're kicking off with 4 floor strains and will soon introduce more formats already familiar to European patients. But I wanted to highlight this because, as Boris said, we talk about Europe a lot, but again, don't sleep on Australia because it is growing rapidly as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's the fastest. I think it is the fastest growing medical market in the world right now in terms of patients and total addressable market. in terms of dollars, and Boris gets access to it through the Canadian LP, Northern Green, that he purchased a while back. Boris has exposure to the EU. He has exposure to Australia. Curaleaf is a global growth story. I know a lot of people want to sit here and badmouth Curaleaf. I mean, its sentiment on Twitter is very negative towards Curaleaf. Curaleaf's got a very big top line that they're going to need to be able to streamline and optimize the American business to expand margins, generate profit out of, but they have exposure to some of the fastest growing markets in the world. And it's a hedge against what's going on in the US if it starts to stagnate. I like the fact that Boris has been forward looking and he's got exposure to Australia and the EU. The medical device that they had announced, I think on Wednesday, it was on Monday of this week in conjunction with Jupiter, it's probably going to find its way into the Australian market as well. It's a great move for Curaleaf. It's just another notch on their belt as far as international exposure. And I would expect this to continue to grow into the future as Australia becomes a bigger and bigger market.
You can't spread yourself too thin, but in some ways I'm not surprised, but a little bit surprised that there's not more companies that came up with this international strategy with some of the bigger American players. But whatever their loss is obviously Curaleaf's gain. And if we get reform, then I think that story is going to get turned around. But man, one thing's for sure, when we speak to Boris every single time, the ideas that he comes up with, he moves quick. And that split store strategy idea that he announced the other day really grabbed my attention. We got a lot of great feedback after the show that pertained to that. And I think it's actually a brilliant move. But I know you were hoping to get up to that smoke shop basically yesterday. You ran into a little bit of issues, but you'll be back there next week. Just wanted to give everyone the heads up. But cool idea, and nevertheless, from what he shared with us on Wednesday.
Yeah, I mean, you don't become a self-made billionaire without taking risks. You don't become a global businessman that's had a track record of success without taking risks, thinking outside of the box, and doing what others are too afraid to do.
Yeah.
I'm not sitting here trying to be a cheerleader for Curaleaf, but the vision is there. The exposure is there outside of the United States. And I mean, while there is a lot to be determined financially within the business, I think that Boris is making all of the right moves as it relates to hemp, international, and overall hedging the overall state-regulated cannabis business that is the underpinning business to Curaleaf.
Yeah. Glop, thanks for that update. Yes. Rubicon, heard from Margaret Brody last night. So aftermarket May 27th, she's coming back on the podcast May 28th to highlight her latest earnings as well. Mark it in your calendar. May the 30th, Canopy Growth is going to be preparing their next report. Q4 and full year 2025 earnings on May 30th. CEO Luc Mongeau and CFO Judy Hong are actually going to walk investors through results and provide key strategic updates. So make sure to log on that day. D. Finney, why is Cresco taking so long with their earnings report? Did I miss something? No, you did not. We were actually supposed to have an interview last Friday with their CEO, Charlie Backdale, but got the word that it is being delayed a little bit. We'll keep you posted on not if, but when that'll be announced. And then after that, we'll look to aim to get Charlie on. But I know there's a lot of people anticipating what their latest numbers are going to be. So there you go.
And that other comment, there is no correlation between Curaleaf and Tilray. They are very, very fundamentally different
zilch
businesses in every sense of the word.
Zilch. John Hamm, good morning. Good to see you. With tourists here in Guatemala all year round, as more countries legalize, we get a little from all over, and always by the will, we get beautiful sweet weed we grow down here. I didn't realize you're down there, John. I thought you were here in the U.S., but happy Friday morning to you. You're a regular on the podcast. Always good to see you. Tony, I agree. It's just going to happen, and pertaining to Donald Trump just coming out of nowhere. Indeed. Guap, good to see you as well, my friend, and glad you're taking care of the chat group right now. And let's move on to our next topic. And AVCN earnings yesterday. They had, I'm just going to highlight some of these numbers. So they did, what was it here? Net income of $74,154 and comprehensive income of $876,092, marking its first profitable quarter, driven by cost efficiencies and improved margins. Revenue performance, they generated $6.32 million in revenue for the quarter, reflecting a 2% decrease compared to Q1 of last year, but alongside a 5% reduction in general and administrative processes. And they also improved their gross margins. I bring all this up because this stock has done well in the last 24 hours. It was up 15%. I think it was the biggest mover of the day yesterday, and it's up another 7% here this morning. So job well done by Arras and his team. And the man knows medical, and they're building something obviously down in Colombia for exporting purposes, but he's provided us a lot of direction and insight and education, not only for the opportunity that he has internationally, but really what the rescheduling process will look like once it's announced in the US. And, he seems like he picked one lane, which was the medical aspect years ago. And some could argue, like, why stick to that? Because it's a long-term approach. But now that we fast forward 7-8 years later, it's really paying its dividends now as far as what his vision was from years ago as to what he's creating.
Yeah, it's good to see. And don't forget, too, that they have that relationship with PMI.
Yeah.
Philip Morris International.
Yep. All right, that wraps up our first segment here today. And now we've got a special Insider's Edge on a Friday. Let's go.
Oh, man.
Take one. How's that? We get it finally? Let's welcome in.
We got it.
President of ATACH, Michael Bronstein, here on a Friday. Good morning, sir. How are you?
Good morning. It just wasn't ready for Friday. When you
that's what I think.
That's what it is.
That was production. TDR, fine production there. But anyways, fake it till you make it, right? Good to see you. How are things?
Good to see you. No, things are good. It's obviously been a very busy week for all of us here. And a lot of news really to report on.
Yeah.
I know you and I have been playing a lot of catch up over this last week, just because of how busy things have been.
Well, it didn't take long. We had you on 11 days ago, and you said pretty much this state-run model is dead on arrival, and we'll begin with that. And what was it? I'm looking at the voting. It was rejected basically 7-3, which was originally proposed by Representatives Rick Krajewski, and Dan Frankel, and they proposed a state-run cannabis model through HB 1200, which we're all familiar with. And you, Anthony, myself are basically saying this is something that we don't want and most likely won't happen. And here we are the next week, and it didn't happen. So now that this has been voted down, just so we understand next steps, what can we anticipate as far as next steps now that this has been rejected?
So the next steps are basically the legislature. I think this opened up a conversation, one that needed to be had too, because the state store idea is a demon that was always going to have to be exercised in the Pennsylvania legislature by Democrats, just because of the politics of the state. And as we all know now, the Pennsylvania and our viewers here know more about Pennsylvania liquor policy than they probably ever wanted to know.
Correct.
Okay? But the thing is that the political ends was always going to have to look like that. And cannabis legalization in Pennsylvania is not going to happen in a vacuum. There are larger forces at play in a budget negotiation. There are larger political forces at play. And the state store discussion was certainly part and parcel of these larger conversations.
Yeah.
One of the things that I thought was really interesting about the hearing, well, there were a number of interesting things about the hearing, but one is that it was scheduled so quickly.
Yeah.
Okay. It was, we found out that the Law and Justice Committee was going to meet the next day, the day before. There wasn't really necessarily a sense of folks. Everybody knew that the state store model was dead on arrival in the Senate. But the question is how are they going to bury it? Was it going to be open casket? Were they going to cremate? Right? Like what was going to happen? Right? Because how it happened also is important too. What was said by people as they were eulogizing the bill was also going to be important, because one of the things that I was looking for was the Senate in this committee going to say legalization for this budget period? let's not have that conversation, right? Let's close the door on a budget period discussion. What we heard was really a mixture of, why did they send us a bill like this, right?
Okay.
Why did they send us a realistic bill with a realistic effort? Because then we could have some level of consideration of it.
So why did they? Why did they then?
To me, it was a political decision where Democrats needed to be able to show that they could pass a bill with all Democratic votes, because when they go into a budget negotiation, it strengthens the hand of the party if they're able to say that they had all their troops on board for a particular policy, right? It doesn't make you split the issue off from a negotiation standpoint. And Republicans are doing the same thing on other issues that we're seeing as they're moving into budget negotiations. And Democrats, in order to get to a bill that all Democrats would be able to vote for, the easiest path to do that was going to include some of the nastier provisions that we saw in that bill. A bipartisan bill would never have included provisions about the state store in it. So when you hear people talking about the need for a bipartisan solution, when you hear the governor say, okay, bipartisan solution, right? When you hear other folks say things about how the bill needs to be bipartisan, by abstention, what it means is that it can't be a state store bill, because Republicans are not going to go for a state store bill. And by the way, there are Democrats that won't go for a state store bill in the end as well. And we saw this in the committee hearing too.
So this isn't a waste of time. This is just all part of the process from what I'm understanding, correct?
They had to get this conversation moving and a vehicle over there, because when a vehicle moves in the budget process, and this was the start of the budget process, I had said, okay, they're firing the gun. What everybody here should know is that of the revenue bills in Pennsylvania that could have moved in order to make up the deficit that they're likely to see, the revenue bill that moved first was a marijuana bill. It wasn't gaming. It was marijuana.
Interesting.
Okay. It wasn't name X ability to get revenue somewhere else. It was cannabis. Interesting. In the budget process, when you look at a budget process and the run up into budget negotiations, and I've been involved in a lot of them, in my time, bills that get passed first in the beginning of the budget process are what the budget process becomes about. Okay. You don't move early on a bill if it isn't going to be the priority that somebody is going to bring to the table with it. Okay. And the way that vote ended in the House, even though state stores was in it, the final 5 minutes of floor time where the leader and Representative Frankel were talking, I think were very telling. What they said was, this bill is going to go over, and we know it's going to change. We welcome a conversation on the bill. And we hope to have a conversation.
So this is a two-part question. Would it have made it out of the House without the state-run stores? And what we keep hearing is that there's a rainy day fund in Pennsylvania to alleviate some of the deficit that's going on within the budget, and they don't want to overdraw that account. So does that make cannabis passing essential to passing the budget in Pennsylvania this year without dipping too far into that rainy day fund?
It makes it essential for Democrats. Democrats control, because they would rather see more funding, not less funding. They don't want to cut critical programs in the state. They don't want to have to cut transportation funding in the southeast part of the state, lay off bus drivers, not have trains coming into Philadelphia. And where most Democrats are located Democrats are located in the southeast part of the state. There's been an extinction event that's been happening in southeast where many of the Republican held areas And this impacts presidential races as well.
Yeah.
The suburban counties, when you listen to what presidential, and all of you think back to the presidential contest and where presidents are elected in Pennsylvania, these collar counties of Philadelphia are often talked about as the swing votes.
Yeah.
And the state has gotten redder in the middle and out to the west. And the counties around Pittsburgh have gotten more conservative, not less conservative. The counties up in northeastern Pennsylvania, more conservative, not less conservative, more red. All right. And we've seen that over a bunch of cycles. So the way that cannabis is playing out has to also do with the fault lines that we have in the state. But remember, we have a governor who's a Democrat. We have a House that's controlled by one vote with Democrats, and the Republicans control the Senate. 2 out of 3 branches in Pennsylvania, Democrats control and have said that they want to see cannabis as a priority in the budget. It's 2 against 1.
There's your
all right.
There's your tail of the tape.
That's the math. All right. So
because I was going to ask the questions, how are Republicans viewing, based on Anthony's question, this emergency fund? It's essential to get cannabis to pass. We understand where the Democrats sit right now, but like you said, when doing the math, it's 2 against 1, right?
So for those of you who enjoy 90s movies, and, I see El Guapo here, and we often reference our 90, in Caddyshack 2, when they get shot with the arrow in the backside at the end of the movie, right? And they go to pull it out, right? What's the question that's asked, right? It's, if you pull out the arrow, will you suck out the poison? And then the person asks, well, is there any money in it for me? Right? That is the way this negotiation is going to go. What's in it for me? What are Republicans going to get out of it? And is the thing big enough that they're going to get out of it that they'll acquiesce to having cannabis legalization back in a budget discussion? And there just isn't enough. Okay, there isn't enough. If Democrats want to keep money in the budget with what's going on federally, what's going on at the state level, this needs to be a consideration. And by the way, it's not just this budget year or this upcoming budget year that people are looking at. It's the budget years after that.
Yeah.
And when you look at the math that the governor has proposed in his budget and you play the years out, they've booked this revenue with how they're looking at it. So to have that revenue in one place, they need to and to execute on other parts of their budget, they need to have it there. Cannabis legalization in Pennsylvania is just as much about revenue as it is about anything else.
I believe that.
Has anyone noticed that none of the other things that we normally talk about when it comes to cannabis legalization have figured front and center in the political discussions around the budget? Anyone notice that? Why? Because it's about the money in Pennsylvania.
Of course.
All right. That's what it's about. And the people who, we're animated as advocates on a lot of number of issues. Has anyone noticed that in Pennsylvania, how little heed there has been given to some of those discussions? It's because it's about revenue. And we hear people talking about revenue. This is being treated like a revenue discussion. It's not being treated as a social discussion. It's not being treated as what is it that we want to do, right? It's about the money.
So that favors us, correct?
And I think that favors us because it makes the conversation less complicated.
Yeah.
Okay. It's not about the social moray of the issue. Okay. When you looked at and there are people who have issues with that, and there is some, but that's not what's entering the discussion right now. When we saw that hearing, when they executed the bill, okay, when they did that public execution of HB 1200, people didn't say, there wasn't a reefer madness argument that was made inside of there, right? It was, guys, you told me that this was going to make money, but you sent a bill over that says we're going to have $100 million bond, and it's going to cost the state $200 to $300 million to roll out this program. So we're going to make $15 million in the first year.
Yeah.
That's like dumb. Okay. That's nothing in a budget. Okay. Yeah. So that's why we're seeing the discussion that we're seeing. And so the odds, like Pennsylvania is on the table. And remember, if Pennsylvania passes cannabis legalization, we are in purple state territory. Mm-hmm. Pennsylvania, and I believe, would be the first state to pass legalization through 2 different chambers on the way to be signed to law that were controlled by different parties. It would be the first time that ever happened in the United States. Okay. So the way that this happens is also going to be a litmus test for what legalization looks like into the future, because we've done it everywhere else we can do it. Okay. We've done it by the ballot, right? We came in and we said, okay, well, in other states, let's pass it through a legislature. And, we wound up passing it through a legislature. There was a lot of things that we had to do. So Pennsylvania is a keystone state in the cannabis legalization regulation movement. Huge state on this, huge market, huge. How is this going to happen? And we got sort of the Pennsylvania-ness out of the way with HB 1200, with the state store discussion being moved. The numbers didn't work. The politics didn't work on it. And now, even though, there's some folks in the background that are still talking about, that the state store idea, the reality is that it was executed in this hearing.
I find it interesting that the state Senate, as you said, addressed cannabis before gaming, and of all states, Pennsylvania. So do you think with that public execution, that's the last time we hear about state-run stores, or the idea of state-run stores in Pennsylvania?
I don't, because I think that you're going to hear, I mean, in a realistic, quote unquote, realistic way. Yeah. Right. You're still going to hear this. You're still going to hear in the background, right? It'll be background radiation on that issue, because what people are going to do is they're going to try to talk about it to get it a labor agreement in the state. And also it'll be used as a wedge because the entire Democratic caucus on the House side voted for it. So at a negotiation table, in order to remove that item, they're still going to have to remove that item in horse trading. Yeah. What this does is it removes the conversation potentially. You'll have a public conversation about cannabis legalization. Then there'll be a private conversation about cannabis legalization that will happen around a 5-party discussion where people will be negotiating larger budget priorities. But because a vehicle has moved out of the House, that is the signal, and that is the indication that it will be discussed during budget negotiations. The fact that the Senate pro tem showed up to this meeting when it was being shot down, I think also showed the seriousness of this conversation relative to the budget, discussions. So it's not that this is going to be an easy lift, far from it. It's not that there isn't disagreement on the ground, because there is disagreement on the ground. The question is, does the external pressure of having to get to a budget deal create enough internal pressure to be able to get a deal done around the table? And I will say this, when big things happen, in this state, it's usually because of money needed around a budget proposal. So the atmospherics right now, in order to move something, are good. Yeah. But the percentage of it going through, we don't know yet. We don't know, we don't know. There's still a lot of questions that have to be answered to do it. But if you had asked a month ago, there were a lot of people who questioned whether a cannabis legalization bill could move or whether cannabis legalization would be talked about. I'll tell you this issue is being talked about in the legislature in a way that I've never heard before.
Man, that's a good thing.
It's a good thing. That's not a bad thing.
That's great. Again, lots of great comments. The Bronstein bomber we have, just Chad, thanks. Writes. And what else we got here? Always follow the money, as Up in Smoke says. And that is definitely a key takeaway here.
I think that's how we get progress. I mean, we've seen it's not going to be social. It's not going to be idealistic. It's going to be, does cannabis put more money in the pockets of the federal government and state governments? And I think in this case, that's our silver bullet. They need the money. We have a solution for their money. Hopefully they can come to a compromise and get this thing done.
Mitch also comments, go ahead. I was going to say that revenue was in their state passed budget as well, writes Mitch. And that's another good point, right, Michael?
Yeah, it has to be what the governor proposed, had it in the budget. Look, there are some issues with the way that it was written about in the budget. There's $500 million coming from fees off of current operators. That's absurd. Okay, that is going to have to be discussed in a budget negotiation. Other numbers are going to have to be proposed. And the taxation, like, I don't agree with the numbers that have been put on the table. We have done a market survey.
As far as the excise tax? Or as far
not
as
the taxation. I'll tell you, I think they're going to get to a taxation rate that is not unreasonable relative to other markets.
Okay.
But they have to set up the market in, as you and every viewer here knows, they have to set up the market in the right way in order to even be able to realize that revenue. Okay. If they're talking about a THC caps that are totally unreasonable and unfounded, if they're talking about fees coming into the program that are more fiction than reality,
those are crazy.
Yeah, they're crazy. Then we're going to run into issues with market launch. So those things are all going to have to be discussed. There's enough time to discuss this. We're talking about a June time period. And look, the other thing is Pennsylvania may not get to a budget in June. They could, a lot of times it goes to July. Sometimes it goes further. Okay. But the point is that it is in the budget conversation right now because money can only come from a couple of places. This is one of them. The fact that they moved this bill first is very, very telling.
Okay, if you and I are having this conversation on August 30th, where are we? Any idea? Or is it just too early to speculate?
If the budget passed and we're having this conversation on August 30th and it passed without cannabis in it, the pressure has decreased relative to the need to pass to do something on the issue. If the budget has not passed and we've had a very long summer and we're fighting back and forth, there are a couple things that could happen. It's either they need the money and they're just trying to figure out how to get to that money and close the deal on another issue in the budget, or they're looking at a budget that is more modest in nature and trying to kick some of the can down the road. The political incentive to get at a budget for Democrats is to govern. The political incentive to not get to a budget from Republicans is because they have concerns about giving the governor wins. But the reality is there's enough of a pie to share here in the win category. And I think that, the budget's rarely down the incumbent that's in office unless they do something completely egregious. In Pennsylvania, I can think of a couple of instances where that happened. Governor Tom Corbett, for those of you who remember him, probably not many. There's Wikipedia available for those of you who don't. Passed a budget that basically cut education funding, and he became one-term Tom. And it was the first time that a governor didn't win re-election on that. And that was a while ago. It's not rare.
One-term Tom. I like that name. You still feel, though, strongly that this will pass? I think that's the key takeaway that people want to know. Or is it still too early to say?
I think that it has as good of a chance as ever to pass, right? What is that? What does that mean? I was watching someone lambasting a weather reporter because they said that there's a 50% chance of rain, right? What does a 50% chance of rain tell you? It tells you literally nothing. Correct. Right? Because it could rain or it could not rain. You've told me nothing, right? I'd rather hear.
When you put it that way, Michael, you're right.
Right. Yeah. You've literally told me nothing that I don't know.
What's this translate into what we're talking about?
I could walk outside and it could rain or it could not rain. So 50-50 odds don't give me anything.
Yeah.
Right. This conversation is happening right now. It's always going to be an uphill battle in Pennsylvania, but if there is a time to do it, this is the time. This is the time to do it, and the best odds of getting it done are right now. And I'm not somebody who, and I remind this to people, I have not cried wolf, right, in cannabis legalization in Pennsylvania. I do not. I've been very, very bearish on it. I've made Nouriel Roubini look like Mr. Sunshine on cannabis when it comes to when it comes to this over the years. And I think right now this conversation is a live conversation. Senate Republicans, they do not necessarily want to pass this, but when it comes to getting at a full budget, this thing is not going to happen in a vacuum. There's going to have to be a trade. Right. There are going to be ups. There are going to be downs. We're going to read probably over these next couple of weeks. Oh no, the budget process is derailed. Oh no, cannabis is derailed off of this. We're going to see more bills come out. We'll see a reintroduction of Laughlin Street. In my view, we'll see Kincaid Major potentially, which had already been introduced, being discussed. And those ideas, I think, have wide bipartisan agreement, which means that there is a pathway.
All right. Well, one of the impressive things you shared, too, is that Caddyshack 2 example. There's a while since I've seen that movie, but I don't think I've ever seen that movie. But those were some pretty big-time movies back. I think the first one was back in the 80s, was it not?
It could have been.
Yeah, it was probably in the 80s.
Maybe it was the 80s. Yeah. The first one for sure. Caddyshack 1 was the best movie, and Caddyshack 2 was the best Caddyshack.
Bill Murray. Who else? Was Chevy Chase in those?
Yeah, he was the main.
Yeah, he was. It was Dan Aykroyd and Chevy Chase, where it was pull out
Chevy Chase wrote.
I'll
Chevy
suck
Chase
out
wrote it.
the poison. Yeah.
You do.
Is there any money in it for me?
You do realize when we create a YouTube short off of this podcast, we're gonna have some Caddyshack B-roll footage in addition to like what you're saying. So
I have Chevy Chase's original script from Caddyshack autographed. His copy of the actual script.
Wow, that's impressive. How did you come across that?
We were going to tokenize it.
Nice.
Long story.
I don't mind that, though.
Why not?
Why wouldn't you?
Yeah.
Before we let you run, let's switch to Texas, where HB 46 received passage in the House. And with it, it marks, I guess, in some ways, the most significant medical cannabis expansion we've seen in that state. What surprised you, I guess, most about the bipartisan support behind it? Because this is welcoming news, is it not?
You could tell. You could just tell. There's like a feeling on the Texas side that the program was too restrictive.
Yeah.
And there was sort of this idea that, well, operators down there that they have a strong lobby or this, that. It's nonsense. I think that what people understood was that the program had to be expanded. And that some of the things that were going on in Texas relative to the synthetic derived THC marketplace, those things, that there are people who are walking into that marketplace because they didn't have access to medical cannabis. And to any normal, rational human being, it would be a good idea to have patients be in a medical program.
Yeah, of course.
All right. And so this is not controversial. Medical cannabis is not controversial.
Not at all.
And certainly in a place like, even we're seeing this in a place like Texas. So a lot of folks, and I would say that the folks who are selling sort of these synthetic products and the proliferation of the synthetic THC marketplace in Texas, were pushing this narrative where it's one, it was one against the other on this. But really, I think that the medical expansion bill, which has been talked about for a number of years, it only showed the reason why that had to happen. When people lined up and they said, if you're going to restrict hemp products in the state, you're going to restrict medicine, people were like, wait a second, why are you using that for medicine?
Yeah.
Okay. You should have access to medicine. And that became, I think, the impetus for a discussion around that. And there's a separate discussion that's happening around, the synthetic THC conversation that has not resolved yet. And we're going to see a vote in the House shortly on it. I think that that there had been broad overreach that had happened. We have to deal with the synthetics, right? We have to deal with the treatment, of those issues. There was a discussion. There's obviously been discussion about the lieutenant governor about banning all THC in the state. We're seeing a microcosm right now of a conversation that's being played out in a number of different states, and Texas is very much a swing conversation on this. If they pass a more restrictive bill that allows hemp consumables, but it doesn't allow synthetic products, I do think that there is likely to be a bellwether moment in the state for the treatment of this.
Well, it's funny how you look at decriminalization, medical cannabis within that state, and we see a lot of the unregulated synthesized markets and what's been going on there, and especially over the last 18 months. But in a lot of ways, do you think all this mess that's happened over the 18 months has actually in a lot of ways helped advance just the overall conversation as to where we are and bring awareness towards getting a proper regulated market within the state?
So the idea amongst the industry and advocacy has been somewhat, let the mess happen so that there's pressure to clean things up.
Yeah.
In the cannabis industry, when we were legalizing in a state-by-state basis, there was this idea that if we legalized in enough states that we would create enough federal pressure to change what the federal government has done. I think we have to revisit that thesis.
Very much so.
Okay. But that was the thesis that was going on at the time. What's happened on the quote unquote hemp side of the equation. All right. And remember, we have been pushing for regulation of hemp for quite some time to make it safe for consumers, to be able to make the marketplace one that has standards around it. The problem that you're seeing now in Texas, the problem that you're seeing in other states is that it's swung so far that instead of seeing legislation that it's like, all right, we're going to create reasonable guardrails, what you're seeing is the pendulum swing in the other direction.
Yeah.
And at the federal level, you're going to see that as well. So there's talks about certain things that people are okay with. Look at beverage, quote unquote, carve outs, right? The reason why they're called carve outs is because the other stuff's not acceptable to people.
Right.
Why do you have to carve it out? You have to carve it out because the other things that are going on are not helpful to folks. Let me tell you this. The moment that you talk about synthetic products is the moment you lose the regulatory argument.
Right.
You're going to lose it. Okay. And the industry that has popped up around synthetic THC is hurting the hemp industry. It's
hurting everyone. Yeah.
Okay. And it's hurting everyone because people don't look at that industry. We make a natural distinction because we understand what that is and what it is that's being sold.
Right.
Right. The vast majority of people do not, and they don't have the time to dive into what it is that we know about this industry. So what are we seeing? We are seeing pushback. We are seeing in courts now, people saying, well, the Farm Bill didn't prevent states from creating more restrictive laws, which we as an organization always believed. We believe that a state has the ability to regulate these products.
Right.
Fundamental, cannabis and hemp.
Right.
And courts are agreeing with that now.
Good.
Okay. So we're starting to see, we're going into a different thing.
That's
and
good.
I think that the press that we see on this has not met the reality of the moment.
Gotcha.
Look at what happened in Alabama. Look at what happened in Tennessee. We're seeing states that were much more liberal on those issues get much more enforcement oriented and drawing lines around the marketplace. And the issue is that we as an industry could have been more responsible. Yeah. We could have said, we are going to develop the standard for X, Y, and Z. We could have certified the product, right? We saw other organizations come out and say, hey, now we're certifying Delta 8 product. Are you kidding me? That's jumping the shark, right? You're certifying a synthetic product? What?
Right.
Right? So, and so we have gotten to a point where people who have been out really just to cash in on that side of the industry are having a hard time facing the hard reality that's been coming down the pike on this issue. And without regulation, all of us are going to get hit. All of us are going to get hit. So it's really important that we address this issue in a responsible way. We create regulation, we create guardrails, we age gate. We're concerned about processes with how these things are produced. We talk about lab testing. Otherwise, there's no opportunity for anyone.
Yeah, I hear you. Well, as you said, cannabis reform is a state-by-state chess game. And when you look at it in the grand scheme of things, let's see if each individual state creates their own laws and regulates it and how that transpires. But that's why you're here, and that's the reason why you're doing what you're doing. But listen, always good catching up. This has been a heck of a lot of information here today. It's been very, very helpful. Great dialogue on Pennsylvania and really shedding a lot of light as to what's going to happen next in Texas as well. But all in all, appreciate the time. All right, you, sir?
It's great to see you.
Yes. Enjoy the weekend. We'll see you back here Monday, okay?
We'll catch you in a little bit.
All right. Thanks, Michael. Appreciate your time.
Thanks,
man, is he bang on? But he's got his
very good insights. Very good insights about PA.
I know.
That's what a lot of people are looking for right now is information on Pennsylvania.
100%. What are we seeing with CGC?
Fun fact, the 50-50 analogy about the percentage chance of rain. So it's actually not the percentage of, it's not actually not the percentage chance of rain in that formula. It really means that 50% of the land mass in that area is going to experience precipitation. So it's going to rain just on the percentage of land that it's covered. Living in Florida and golfing, you become a borderline meteorologist trying to predict the weather during the summer.
Now with more details on the weather, let's go to meteorologist Anthony Varrell. Anthony?
Yeah.
It's going to rain. What are we seeing with CGC? It was up 15%. Some people were saying a little bit earlier.
CGC is up 15% on some decent volume.
What else? Anything else moving?
A bunch of stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Long weekend in Canada. So all of our Canadian viewers, enjoy your long weekend. And that's a wrap for today. Back here Monday. And you might be going solo. We might have a pre-record on Monday afternoon, but I'll keep you guys all posted. Have the weekly recap on Sunday night as per usual. And I'll have some more reform content coming out tomorrow. Anything else you want to add as far as this?
Yeah, the Panthers and Maple Leaf series ends tonight in Florida for Game 6. Which I think you've got some crow to eat as per the pants getting beaten off of the Maple Leafs tonight.
Why?
There you go.
What is this?
In Toronto.
You think beat the pants off of them? Oh, Jesus. Yeah. I don't think so. I disagree. I think the Leafs are winning tonight, but I could be wrong. Mark,
you were in fact
I think the Toronto Maple Leafs are beating the Florida Panthers tonight. We'll talk about it on Friday and find out who's right, who's wrong.
I don't know what Guap is talking about, but I do not play disc golf. But yes, the Leafs are getting the Leafs will probably get the doors blown off of them tonight. So I won't use the pants analogy.
Oh my God, that was hilarious. Yes, yeah. Leafs are winning tonight. It was 6-0 at one point.
Yeah.
And
Austin Matthews is still on a milk carton.
Oh God. This team, every single spring, that market just talks about lack of emotion and grit when the going gets tough. That's the thing with them. When they get a little bit of pressure on them, I just see them as like whiners. This younger generation, whiners. I know I shouldn't say that, but
they're talented. They whooped our ass the first 2 games, and then the Panthers figured it out.
Yeah, but
they shut them out for 5 straight periods.
Why am I drawing
almost
a blank?
6 straight periods?
Who did Florida play first round again?
Florida played the Tampa Bay,
and they beat them in 5 games.
They
right?
beat the shit out of Tampa. Yeah.
I want a Game 7 live stream with these two. Yeah, maybe. Marner needs to be shipped out big time. Well, Anthony was actually saying this before we went live today. Austin Matthews is not going anywhere. He's the face of that franchise. And if you don't sign Marner, you got $12 to $13 million freed up. And I don't know, why wouldn't you go after Sam Bennett, bring him in? But I don't think he's leaving Florida. They're not letting him walk. That guy's he's a gamer. All right. It's Friday night, game number 6 in Fort Lauderdale. Are you going to the game?
I'm not.
No,
wife does not want to go. So.
Boris hinted to first major sports arena partnership, and
I wouldn't be surprised to see Select in the
Panthers.
I don't even know what it's called now. The national. I still call it the National Car Rental Center.
They change that name every year, it seems.
Yeah, they do. It's gone through everything.
What was another one? BB&T.
It might be BB&T right now, I think. I still call it the NCRC. I still call Hard Rock Stadium Joe Robbie Stadium. Once they get a name, it sticks.
I'm impressed. Yeah. NBA Oklahoma Denver last night. I saw that. Yep. Denver forced a Game 7.
It's gonna be Minnesota and or Denver against Indy. That's gonna be like a snooze fest.
Rather fitting for the NBA, considering the low ratings that they've had. But now in the playoffs, it's been decent. But with the Warriors,
the best storyline is a Tatumless Celtics
next year.
Beat the Knicks. No, beat the Knicks.
Oh,
beat the Pacers, and then go to the finals.
That'd be a hell of a story.
That's the best storyline, and they got to go up against Joker.
Yeah,
or Ant-Man. I like both of them.
Well, with Tatum out all next year, that first round series between the Pistons and Knicks, somebody told me that's the Eastern Conference Final next year. Wouldn't surprise me. That was a hell of a series. But good for the Knicks. I know you hate the Knicks, but there's no better place to watch a basketball game than Madison Square Garden's greatest arena in sports. It's phenomenal.
Yeah.
All right.
I don't agree with that necessarily, that the winner of the Panthers Hurricanes is winning the cup. I would not be surprised if the Oilers win the Stanley Cup, even if it's against the Panthers.
The way they're McJesus after they beat Vegas, it was just like,
I think his run starts now.
I think he's like, doesn't even give a shit. Like, we're on to the next round, and then the next one. He looks determined.
I will gracefully admit defeat if we lose to the Oilers.
Yeah.
And it comes
very reminiscent. I will say, back in the, I'm showing my age now, but everybody obviously greatest player to play the game, Wayne Gretzky. And then when he was good, but then got to the end of his prime, you Mario Lemieux in, and you could try to have the same argument with Sidney Crosby. And he's still a great player, but towards the end of his career. And I think McDavid is kind of like that Mario Lemieux type player in this generation, but unbelievable player. That's for sure. Best hockey player I've seen in the last probably 30 years in the league.
McDavid?
Yeah,
by far.
Phenomenal.
He moves different than everybody. He's the best.
I'd hate to see what happens to the league if he wins the cup, because if you've got the best player in 30 years that knows how to win, then you've got perhaps yourself a dynasty. But let's
tell you, if he wins this year, he's finally arrived, and he's going to start ripping off championships. Him and Draisaitl are serious.
Jonathan, he's much faster than Mario, 100%.
Yeah.
Mario is. Me personally, I think Mario Lemieux is the greatest hockey player since I've been alive. I didn't really see Gretzky. Like, yes, I saw Gretzky. I was a little too young, but my teenage years in my early 90s, it was just, can you imagine a guy off for 2.5 years because of cancer? He retires from hockey, and his first game back, he has 5 points.
He was great.
Yeah. All right. Enough sports. Let's say how this market performs the rest of the day. But anyway, appreciate everybody for logging on here today. Enjoy your week. 12 our Canadians. Have a good long weekend. We'll keep you all posted on scheduling wise over the weekend. And big thanks again for everybody logging on here today. We're almost at 50,000 subscribers. So if you get a chance, make sure to smash that like button, leave some comments below. And as usual, make sure to subscribe if you haven't done so already. We're almost at 50,000. We're growing because of you. So thanks, everyone. Appreciate it. Enjoy the rest of your weekend.
That's it. Thanks, everybody.
So what'd you think of all that information? Some interesting stuff that we just learned once again here at the TDR Traded Black podcast. Let's keep the conversation going. So leave your comments below. We'd love to get your feedback. As usual, if you have time, make sure to like, subscribe, and smash on that bell for all notifications. And stay connected with us here at the Trade to Black podcast. Thanks for watching, everyone.